Good afternoon. Today is March the 6th, 2021. We're at the National Museum of Education in Stow, Ohio to conduct an interview for the Kent State Guardsmen Oral History Project. Thank you for agreeing to participate in this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Just for the sake of the record, I am Jared Jones. I'm a junior at ONU, a history major.
My name is Lindy Holmes. I am a senior history major at ONU, also minoring in public history, museum studies, and religion.
If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Captain Ron Snyder from the Kent State May 4, 1970 National Guard deployment to Kent State University.
Where are you from?
I'm originally from West Virginia, down toward Ravenswood, Ripley, West Virginia. I was born there, still own the property. My family came north for work after World War II.
All right, so I guess the first question, really, to jump into the Guard side of things. How long were you in the National Guard?
I was in the National Guard 18 years, and then I transferred to the Reserve.
And what capacity did you serve in during your time while you were in the Guard?
Well, I started out as a private and advanced through the ranks to a Sergeant E6, and I tested in the Officer Candidate School, Fort Benning, Georgia, and I graduated from the OCS school, became a lieutenant, an officer, if you will, and then I had like 3 or 4 more deployments to active duty. I was a platoon leader in the Guard, I was an exec officer in the Guard, and then I became company commander, and I was company commander for 5 years.
Would you say that there's a specific reason why you joined the National Guard?
Probably out of patriotism. I didn't have a military obligation at the time I joined. I just joined because it was extra money, and you know, my family. I came from a military family.
So were you a full-time National Guardsman?
No, I wasn't. I was a weekend warrior, if you will.
So what was your full-time occupation while you were in the Guard?
I was a coroner's investigator and deputy sheriff.
Can you tell us a bit about what that entails, what that job was like?
Yes, the coroner in Ohio has the responsibility to determine the cause of death and investigate the causes of death of anybody that dies from homicide, suicide, suddenly, with no doctor, and a multitude of other conditions. And we had investigators that went out to these scenes and conducted an investigation, photographed, documented the scene, talked to witnesses, things like that. It was like a detective in a detective bureau.
Right.
And then we wrote a report and submitted that to the coroner, and then after the autopsy was done, he would look at the autopsy and look at the investigation reports and make a determination. The autopsy would tell him what the person died from. The investigation would tell him whether it was a homicide, suicide, just a sudden death, that kind of thing. Many people die under 50 years old, walking down the street, and boom, they just die. And that's an unusual death, but most times it's their heart just stops. That's the short story.
Right.
So what were some of the reasons that your Guard unit was called out?
Well, we were already out at the time we were summoned to Kent. And how that works is this. We were on the truck, what they call the trucker strike. And my company was at Richfield, Ohio, about 15, 20 miles from here. And we were escorting trucks to the turnpike, and the trucker strike was in full force. The people that was striking, they would try to intimidate the drivers with guns and threats and that kind of thing. And there was one shooting incident on the way up to the turnpike. All that was going on, and we were billeted or staying at a closed school in Richfield at the time. And I first got the word, I'm thinking it's on a Friday, we'd have to check. The they put us on alert that there was a possibility that we would be deployed to Kent State University. And how that works is yet this. It's like any other incident where somebody summons as a guard. The mayor of the city of Kent felt that they were incapable of handling any further civil disturbances. So he signs a letter which is then transmitted to the governor requesting the deployment of the National Guard. And the governor then makes a decision whether or not to deploy those elements of the National Guard. We were an Army infantry unit, okay? And we were the closest ones. I think they were already deployed at Ohio State, but I'm not certain. If they weren't already, they were deployed sometime later. Following that, the governor decided to deploy to Kent State. So then the adjutant general of the state of Ohio, he puts somebody in charge, which in this case was General Canterbury, and told the units to deploy. Well, it was kind of a simple thing for us because we were already deployed, so we didn't have to bring anybody in. And this was our third deployment in disturbances, okay? So it wasn't anything new to us. And with that, some of the guys we'd allowed to go home and shower because we'd already been out there for quite a few days, and it was getting difficult. You know what I mean? And with that, as soon as we got them back, we got in our vehicles and headed out the highway down through Akron and out Interstate 76. And by that time, it was roughly getting dark when we started Fort Kent. And we were receiving some updates about the disturbances going on. And at the time, we had the understanding that the rioters had already kind of tore the town up the night before. So as we're traveling toward Kent State, I'm in the lead Jeep. We come up over a rise as we approach Brimfield, and the skies, did you guys ever see how Baghdad looked when they hit them with the bombs?
The red skies.
Yeah, the red skies.
Yes, I've seen photos.
Well, as soon as we got to that point just outside of Talmadge, the red skies were lit up, but we didn't know what it was. But we knew it wasn't good, you know, because it was low-hanging clouds. It was, of course, about May the 1st, and it was kind of decent weather. But the sky had lit the clouds up pretty good, and I think already a unit of the 107th Armored Cavalry had already hit Kent. They were already there. We got off on Route 43 and we were routed through the downtown and around to where we were going to have a place to stay, which was a school very near the university. So we went there and got all of our baggage out, set up our bunks and all that stuff. We did not deploy downtown that night. Not sure what happened there, I just never bothered to find out. From there, that's the deployment to Kent State.
So, you said that as a part of part of the Guard being called to a location is that the local government decides that they just don't have the resources or the ability to control the situation.
That's correct.
So when you arrived, would you have said that the local forces just were not capable of controlling the situation that they were in?
They definitely were not.
So describe that scene, like just you did a bit, but can you tell me a bit more about the arrival?
Well, as soon as we got to the school, the sky was still kind of lit up. We found out that the rioters had burned down the ROTC building and that they'd caused destruction downtown. And the numbers were such that it was obvious that the local law enforcement, which included the Kent Police Department, the Sheriff's Office, and anybody else they called to assist, was incapable of bringing that in check. And there was all kinds of other things involved too. We had intelligence reports, which Some were founded later on, some weren't. One, for example, is that they had machine guns near the campus camera in the trailer park, and the rioters were going to use them, see. Things like that. It's what I call urban terrorism. Today, we didn't know the word terrorism back then, by the way. That's a new word I've used for the same thing. Okay.
What were some of the more notable emotions that you felt perhaps on the morning of May 4th? Any specific memories that pop out? Any specific scenes that you can describe?
On May 4th itself?
The morning of
Now
May 4th.
you realize we had 2 days before that.
If you would like to explain, we'd be grateful.
Yeah, I can. Saturday was another day following our day there. We had had patrols out, protection of like electric facilities, water. We had a rumor that was going around that they were going to contaminate the water system with LSD. You know, the usual kind of things that you find in those sort of activities. So we had guards on those places and patrols on the street with the police. That's what was pretty much going on during the daylight on Saturday. Well then, Saturday night though was another bad situation. They had you know, there's a difference between demonstrations and rioters. I want to cover that down buildings and stuff like that. That's at least that was the way it was then. Maybe here in 2000, and after that, you know, it's like what happened in Portland, places like that. They kept calling them demonstrators, but they still burned down the town. To me, that's a political situation. But anyway, in Kent on Saturday, then as darkness come, which all rioters like darkness, and we knew that, there was a huge gathering of students at the corner, I believe it was Summit and Main Street, right at the entrance to the campus. I can't tell you how many, but then my unit in the 107th Armored Cav sent units there to control access, if you will. My job was from in front of the Rockwell Hall to Main Street and across, was to prevent the rioters from coming around and coming back and getting on campus to burn more buildings. They had been downtown. The 107th Armored Cav pulled an armored personnel carrier up, which drew a lot of attention. You know, they called it a tank. It's just it's an armored vehicle that carries people. That's all that is. And there was a lot of activity. Some people got hurt. Finally, I think tear gas was deployed, and the rioters went the way we had meant for them to go. They didn't come by my company. I had men strung out all the way across Main Street. And somebody led them to go back to Tri-Towers. Have you guys looked at a diagram? You know, Tri-Towers is a residence hall, 3 towers, and that's where they deployed to, the rioters. And that night, that was a pretty active night. I mean, a lot of things went on there. A lot of people were either drunk or high on drugs, I don't know which. They'd confront guardsmen, and the guardsmen would repel them. And oftentimes, some of them got hurt. So there was a lot of activity going on. Now later, I got a radio message to meet General Canterbury on campus, which I did with the company. Well, you know, with the company I had available. It was about 30 to 40 men, okay? And he wanted to clean out the rioters from the Tri-Towers, you know, the hall downstairs. There was a lot of activity in there. There was a lot of fights going on, people drinking and all that kind of stuff that you hear about. So General Canterbury walked with me at the front of the unit, and when I was able to observe the Tri-Towers, I said, let's stop a minute, General. you don't tell a general no, okay? I knew that if we went down there and started getting people out of the tri-towers for the police to arrest, that there would be a lot of injury, and it wouldn't be the guard, okay? Because it would have been a real, as they say in Ireland, a Donnybrook. So I said, well, General, I said, they're only hurting themselves. I said, maybe you ought to reconsider your decision. He looked at him and he watched some of the activity, and they were contained. And he said, okay. Yeah, he said, let them go. If they just hurt themselves and they don't burn the building down, I suppose that's okay. So with that, now that's not the exact words, I don't want to mislead you. We had words, I don't remember the exact words, but that was the context of what happened there. So we go back and we try to get a decent night's sleep, which was about 5 hours probably. So Sunday comes. And Sunday is just kind of a normal day and nothing much goes on. Okay, at least nothing much to talk much about. Following that is Monday, I believe it was Monday. Do you have a calendar? Anyway, I think it was Monday, which was May 4th. You know, you got to know that it's over 50 years down the road. Okay. May 4th, we got up, and by this time everybody was kind of grungy. We had used tear gas and stuff, and sometimes that stuff stays in your clothes. Everybody's been sweaty, and I made arrangements for part of them to get showers. And myself and my radio operator, my driver, and another guard jumped in my Jeep. And I lived in Stow at the time, Stow, Ohio, where we are now. Not too far from here, about a half mile. And we went there and had a shower. Got all cleaned up and everything. I think they had a couple extra uniforms. And we were just about to go back to Kent. I was going to go meet my first sergeant and see how the troops were doing, and if everybody got fed and everything was good. And I got a radio call to move my company to the campus right away. So it's getting on toward noon. And I did. You know, we brought the company up, and I was on the left side as you faced Taylor Hall, and there was 107th Armored Cavalry, and also a company from the 1st Battalion of the 145th Infantry, which was my battalion, and we were there where the burned out ROTC building was. So that's where we were, and then the crowd built on what they call Blanket Hill today. I think they called it that then, but not many people know that. It's called Blanket Hill. And they started ringing the bell that's at the bottom of Blanket Hill, and more people came. And as that built up, it became obvious that this was going to be something, there's going to be action, okay? Let's see. No tear gas was deployed at that time. Now, how we worked that is, in an infantry rifle company at that time, the average platoon has 43 men. That's 42 men and an officer. Sometimes you can put 4 or 5 more in, depends on your mission. You might do it with 30. But anyway, for riot purposes, we had several what they called M79 grenade launchers, which is, it looks like a big shell about this long that has a cylinder that can be fired with tear gas in it. Then every trooper, soldier, will have some tear gas grenades. So we were ready to go. And then there was what I kind of call the assembly to prepare for what's going to happen next. And at this time there was a lot of people throwing things, whether it was rocks or what have you, I don't know, from the crowd. So then it was declared a riot at some point in time. You know, nobody just waves a magic wand and says, we now have a riot. It just happens, okay? Then they decided to read the Riot Act, which is another thing. When you go to move against rioters, somehow you need to have an assembly like that. We have a law, it's a United States code, that says read the Riot Act, which tells them that they have so much time to disperse and leave the area, and if they don't, you're going to take action. And they could be arrested and so on. I don't remember the exact words of that anymore. It's kind of like when you give a suspect their rights. You know, they got a right to a lawyer, and anything they can be used against them and so on. It's a set of rules. Nobody moved. And so they did this quite often. I mean, they had a bullhorn and everything, and the Jeep went back and forth, and a police officer read the Riot Act. I'm guessing that this went on for 20, 30 minutes. Nobody was going to leave. The crowd got bigger, got bigger, got bigger. So somewhere the decision was made to move them out, close the campus, that kind of thing. So when that happened, I was assigned to go to the left and take up the space between the two buildings at the top of the hill so that they can't come around, get behind the two units that go up to the right, which was A Company and 107th Armored Cav. And their mission was to push the rioters down over the hill the other way toward Tri-Towers, or at least toward that area. So with that, we moved out firing tear gas and that kind of thing. Some of them would pick them up and try to throw them back and things of that nature. But the bottom line was the tear gas was effective and the move was effective. They all ran up over that hill. And then with my unit, I took up the space so they couldn't come around behind the unit and throw rocks at them and things of that nature. So my unit's right out in front, between the two buildings on the leading edge. And then I couldn't see A Company and the 107th. So they are down over the hill somewhere, like I guess it was a baseball diamond or something. Pretty soon they get the word to come back. And they're coming back, and I caught just a small glimpse of them going up the hill in behind, I think it's Taylor Hall, I'm not sure what the name is. And then there was a surge of students. Some people said 50, some people said 500, I don't know how many. But I'm right out in the edge of the building, along with my operators and my unit. So then, there's all these people running toward the guard. I assume the guard was up there. I know there's pictures that shows them at the top. And then there's, let's see, there's bang, bang, and I thought, oh, maybe somebody threw firecrackers or something. But it sounded different, you know. And then there was a barrage of shooting, and that's, I guess, what they called it for 13 seconds. And all about from here to the wall in front of me, one of those guys, and I hope this don't upset you, but literally his mouth was open and it took out the back of his head. Okay? Then there was some others that fell, and that's kind of when we knew that was pretty deep going on. Okay? Didn't know what caused it or anything like that. So with that, I decided to take a squad with me so I didn't get captured. And we went out to see what was going on, and I called for the ambulances to be sent up. And that's pretty much it. The ambulances arrived, and they took the dead and the wounded and moved them out. And after a while, then they told us to come back to the ROTC building, which we did. But it wasn't over at that point. A huge crowd came back in. And when that happened, you know, we had a pretty good sized line roped off and all that kind of thing. You've seen the pictures. It was some people have said a more angry crowd at that time, a group. And maybe they were. I'm sure they were, by some people's testimony. And the general, well, the first thing I did is because I knew it was a shooting. So the first thing I did was to go up and down my line of troops and make sure their weapons were locked. You know, nobody had the safety off. That's the word the Army uses. You know, lock and load. You heard that. And so that there's no accidental discharges or anything would happen. So with that, after I checked all that, asked everybody if any of them fired, and they said no. And pretty soon, there's some activity that went on with the general and other people, and the general told the company commanders that if that crowd tries to overtake us, which by this time there was a lot of people, that we may have to shoot. And I just made sure that my guys was not going to shoot unless I gave them a command. Because you do have the right to shoot if you think your life is in danger. Okay? And then a professor, whose name just escapes me right now, he got involved in this and was trying to explain to the crowd how serious this was. And I don't remember the exact text of his language, but I could hear him. He was telling them, in effect, if they didn't do certain things, that it could cost them their life. Okay? And he was right. He was right. Then there were several meetings, and then another professor got involved. And eventually, their activity in dealing with the students helped defuse the situation. That's the bottom line. And then we were there, I think, for another night, and eventually we went home. Because they closed the campus, locked everything down, and then, you know, had maybe 3-4 investigations went through later on, grand juries and everything. They indicted some guardsmen, but everybody knew that that was not going to go anywhere because, you know, I guess they said that they were fearful of their life, and that's why they shot. So, following that, we had a series of times. Well, for example, the U.S. Marshals used to wait outside our houses for us to go to work so they could deliver lawsuit papers. I don't know. We were sued for millions and millions of dollars, both as individuals and as units and all that kind of thing. So that's what I know. We went to target practice at Camp Perry after that on Mother's Day, and then to we went for our 2-week deployment to Michigan and that kind of thing.
So I have a couple of questions kind of in the vein of, so you were in this is an infantry, just an infantry line company.
Yeah.
How much training did your company have in like crowd control tactics and things of that nature?
I can't give you the hours, but it was a lot. Every soldier in the unit, and some, I have veterans in there too. You got to remember that. Every soldier in that unit had been on active duty for at least 6 months. They'd been trained in tear gas and things of that nature. When they came back in, I mean, this wasn't our first rodeo, as they say. You know, we'd been, especially with Akron, we had had a lot of training. I can't give you hours, but I'm going to pull one out in my head here and say that it would be, I would have to think that it was at least, from the start of the riotous years, at least 100 hours. But we also trained in infantry tactics too. I mean, that was our main mission, The riot control thing was just something that we were taxed with by the governor, okay? You know, you can't, whether it's police or what have you, you can't have a deployment situation and no control. So you have discipline. You know, you march, you do turn left face, you go right face, all on command, things of that nature. You go to the field and you practice tactics, infantry, rifle training, all that stuff. So if I said that to go to a riot, if I said 50 or 100 hours was riot training, that would be wrong in this context that it takes more than just talking about and practicing how to put your gas mask on for riot and all that stuff. Because that's all integrated right into the CBR program, chemical, biological, radiological warfare. Because just like they were in Iraq, you know, they were everybody had to be prepared for chemical warfare because the possibility was there. So, so they had lots of training, and so if I take that 100 hours of additional training and multiply that by the other training that was necessary to make them a smooth working disciplined unit, which they were, I would say maybe 400 hours. Yeah, and that's just a guess.
And you were equipped as a line infantry, like line company would be, right? Like, was there any were there any like additions made for crowd control? Any additional equipment used by the Guard during that time period for crowd control?
No, the only thing that was available was the M79 grenade launchers, which we would normally fire high explosive grenades at an enemy that we were engaging. They had made these projectiles with tear gas in it.
Okay. So do you think that things would have gone differently if the Guard had been equipped with riot control gear? Like the stuff that we see today, we've seen today, like the riot shields and batons and things like that.
Well, I don't know, but I strongly suspect. First of all, let's talk about 1970.
Right.
None of that stuff existed. The police didn't have it. Police were really ill-equipped. They didn't even have tear gas to spray on people when they got out of control. You had basically two choices as a police officer, which I was. You know, you hit them with a nightstick and try to get the cuffs on them. And if that don't work, you know, you shoot them. That's pretty much how it was.
Right.
Now, as a result of those riot years, I think a lot of research was done and a lot of development. And quite frankly, tear gas is really the way to go. Tear gas makes people want to leave and go home, and it doesn't hurt them. And I don't clearly understand, as I sit here today, why they never used tear gas in Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, and Minneapolis, St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. I mean, you deploy a little tear gas, everybody goes home. They may come back next day, but they go home right then. And it doesn't hurt anybody. So we deployed literally hundreds of rounds in Akron, you know. But today, the police have lots of tools. But you see what that got them, did you?
Right.
Nowhere. I mean, yeah, if they have to wade into the crowd, but see, I don't know what the answer is today, if that's where you're going.
No, I was just asking if you think. And I guess the last question I have in that vein is, being a police officer at the time, did you bring any of your police gear with you to the to Kent State? Like
no, and I wouldn't have allowed any of my men to either, because you know we're a military unit. We were an infantry unit. Our mission was to close with and kill the enemy. Okay.
Right.
So you know you have to have discipline and things. I can't have everybody looking like a bunch of ragtag pioneers going down the road with clubs and all that kind of thing. You know, that's just how you do it. Now I did loan Major Jones, who's now deceased, Major Harry Jones, who was on the Hill. I did loan him a pistol, a pistol that I owned,
Right.
and it was never fired.
All right.
I have that at home. Yeah. But that's all I know of that was civilian gear. And that was only because he came directly there and didn't go by the armory to check out a 45.
All right.
Moving back to the 13 seconds of gunfire, I guess you could say the pinnacle of the event. You said that there was a little bit of confusion on your part as to what that was. You knew it didn't sound like firecrackers, that it was obviously something different.
Yeah, well, I knew very quickly that it was something different because the building to my left, chips of rock flew out from the concrete on the building. And I knew that those were probably high-powered rifle slugs, bullets, if you will. The two that confused me was the first two and then the barrage. Okay, I wasn't confused, I just didn't have the right answers I was looking for.
Did you have any other kind of emotions going through your head, whether it was during the event or perhaps directly afterwards, after you found out what had transpired?
Okay, no, the answer is no, and I'm going to give you a caveat on that. You need to know my background, okay? I'd seen lots and lots of people dead. I'd seen a person killed. I'd seen people jump off the North Main Street Viaduct in Akron. So I've been doing this since I was 15 years old. I worked for funeral homes and all that kind of thing. So and you don't do that and feel sorry for everybody or get excited. You see what I mean? And so I really had no unusual emotion on it, and still don't. But to me, it was an incident in my life, a significant incident, if you will, because it's become a historical event. But everybody pretty much went home, went on with their life afterwards, including me, and I get reminded of it every May 4th, but other than that, no, it's not played a significant role in my life.
During our preliminary research for this, as we were doing research, came across a New York Times article that was dated to fairly contemporary with the Kent State shootings. I think sometime afterwards, post conclusion of the trial, and it said that you had stated that one of the students who'd been shot had a firearm on them, and that you later said that that was not the case. Can you? And I want to say first off, this is not a gotcha question or anything.
I've had that question before.
I just want to ask about
No, that doesn't bother me.
And the same article also said that you you felt that you couldn't recant that statement from pressure from the National Guard.
No.
That's not the case?
That's not the case.
Well, then set the record straight for us. Tell me about that.
Okay, that has to do with James Michener. Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Okay. He was contracted to produce a book, which he did. Kent State, What Happened and Why. And it was published in that book. It was something that, in my opinion, was taken out of context. Every legal procedure that came from Kent State, I testified the truth.
Right.
Okay, so it was no item to me because I testified to the truth in all legal procedures. But there was a good effect to that though, and the good effect is the governor and the National Guard and the Pentagon and other people were ignoring what was going on because they thought everybody'd go down the road and nothing happened, but there was all these lawyers getting involved, and we knew the lawsuits were coming, right? Well, eventually, after they knocked on the door with the lawsuits, they finally started assigning lawyers to the Guardsmen, okay? And that was something that was necessary. But that was after the books started coming out. There's one thing that I find, and I can't tell you how many books have been written. They all say a few things the same, and then they give somebody else's opinion on everything, okay? That's some very well-trained people making money writing books. And that's okay, that's what they do, that's what authors do. They write books, make money. Now, I don't know if anybody made a lot of money, but yeah, every year, or every 5 years anymore, see, most people that even know about Kent State starting to die away. And so the last time I checked, I think in fact I bought one, was just to see what he had to say. At the bookstore at Kent State, I think there was 5 authors with books on the table, signing them and selling them to students, if you will. And some of them will come with some of the most really ridiculous off-the-wall theories and things like that. And there's a recent guy who wrote a book, and I hope you read it. It's a recent one. And I don't know what he says. He does a lot of posturing about a number of different subjects, and basically you wouldn't recognize it as a Kent State book. Okay, that's what he calls it.
All right. So if I recall correctly from the article, this was in the context of the not the criminal trial, but the civil trial that came afterward. I guess because we're talking about that now, can you tell me about the civil trial?
Well, there's several.
Can you tell me about the ones you were involved in?
I was involved in all of them.
All right.
Okay. Finally, we were assigned to some very talented big law firm in Cleveland to defend the garden. And there was lots of sworn statements under oath, which I'm told now are marshaled all together in Harvard or somewhere. That's not first, I apologize. You're talking about the civil trial only, not the criminal, right?
Yeah, just the civil trial, yeah.
The preparation for the trial went on a long time, perhaps a year or two. And then they started with the trial itself, and everybody had to go to Cleveland, testify, review their sworn statement under oath, and testify at the trial. And there was lots of lawyer stuff that went on. I think it went to the U.S. Supreme Court a couple of times, and mainly because the other side kept saying it was not a riot. Well, the U.S. Supreme Court finally ruled it was a riot. Nobody now can dispute that. And various legal proceedings went on in preparation and then afterwards. Well, eventually, that was a no-brainer there. It was not basically we won that trial.
Right.
Then there was a second trial scheduled. And there's a bunch of preparation for that, which made a lot of anxiety for people who are not familiar with doing that kind of thing. You know, being a law enforcement person, I was used to testifying in court and doing all that stuff. So I understood. And so when the second trial became more and more ready to be executed, somebody that I don't know about except what we were told, somebody, I think the other side knew that it was a second loser, okay?
Right.
For the lawyers. And lawyers don't like losers because they don't get paid, okay? So I think they convinced this side that, hey, we can avoid this. And now it's about money. It's not about justice. It's not about any of those things. they said, hey, look, you know, give us $600,000 or $700,000 or $800,000 to divvy around, and we'll make this thing go away. And they did. Okay.
Right.
The wounded got some money, and some other people got some money. The deceased students' families got a little bit. And quite frankly, $600,000-$700,000 in any lawsuit like that's nothing. Okay. It was money to make it go away so the lawyers could get some money too. Okay.
Right.
Now, the significant thing here, which is kind of interesting to me, everybody involved in that lawsuit signed a document. And basically the lawsuit was settled because we said, we're really sorry this happened. That's pretty much it. I don't know if you ever read it or not.
No, I haven't. That's the.
You should read that.
That's what settled it. Is that?
That's what settled it. We're sorry it happened. And I don't know anybody that really was sorry it happened because it took too much time out of her life. And it's too bad anybody got killed.
Right.
Wounded, hit in the shin with a riot stick, any of those things. Okay?
Right.
However, there's this document with, I'm going to guess that there's probably 40 signatures on there. I'm not sure how many.
Right.
So down the road we go, like 40 years or so, and the judge dies. And his estate's being settled. It turns out that the United States judge that was to try the case, who approved the paper, the document, had the original document there. Well, it's got the governor's signature, General Canterbury's, mine, all the company commanders, and the troopers that had to testify, okay? And it was sold at a historical document auction, I think, for like $70,000. It was a lot of money.
Right.
So the only people that really made any money on that was the judge's estate, if you will.
And so I guess the only other question I have in that vein there is that you, at the time at the time at Kent State, you did say that there was like that one of the students had a firearm on them, like one of the students who'd been killed had a firearm. And you later said that that was not the case.
That's right.
Why you later retracted that, I guess.
I kind of gave you a hint earlier.
Yeah,
And I'm going to leave it at that.
All right.
Because let me put it this way.
All right.
They needed to start defending the troopers who were being threatened with their livelihood and everything else. Okay?
Okay.
And that really created a little ruckus, if you will.
Right.
And but it was effective because that's how they got their lawyers, and that's how they got the defense of the thing.
All right.
Okay?
In the years that passed after that, were you treated any differently under any circumstance after anyone had known about your involvement in the Guard or known that you were a Guard at Kent State?
Oh yeah, yeah. You know, I continued to go to college. I've got a couple of years at Kent State. I graduated from the University of Akron, if you will. For example, I was taking a speech class, and I was doing real good at it. Okay, I thought I had all A's going. And this person who was a professor, the professor, she didn't really know me. She was very suspect of me. Uncomfortable, if you will, because I was an adult, basically. I was 34, 35 years old, whatever it was. And I was in law enforcement. And one of the students that sat beside me said that she thought that she had seen a gun that I carry, because I work detective bureau all the time, okay? Maybe seen that gun under my jacket, which I carried all the time. And she started asking around, and then I had seen a couple of people on campus who knew me, and my involvement. And we go to the finals, and I thought it was a great speech. And when the final grade comes out, she gave me a D minus, if you will. They had letter grades at the time, and I thought that's not right, you know. So I raised a big ruckus with the dean and all that stuff, and it went away, and I got an A. But that was what really offended me,
Right.
you know, because I knew why she did that. And so, and the other had to do with some dope smoking too. She'd been tagged once, and her lawyer made it go away with possession, you know, and so she hated law enforcement people too. So that was part of it. I've had some unusual occurrences, if you will.
Right.
At Kent State, I was talking, you know, around at Kent we have some people that their lifestyle hasn't much changed since 1970, okay? And I've had the occasion to encounter a couple of them and get to talking, and when they figure out who I am, they start shaking. You know, they're not very, I don't know if they're just uncomfortable with me, or whether they're uncomfortable with anybody that's had anything to do with law enforcement. You know, you just don't know. But basically, I've never had anybody discriminate against me. I mean, they invite me to participate in panel discussions. They invite me to, in fact, we're going to be doing with one of the retired professors who was actually one of the rioters, with a program this summer to orient school teachers. I don't know the exact program. I've got some stuff to read up on the Kent State incident in the early part of July. So it's there really isn't anything. Those are just unusual incidences I spoke to you about.
So one of the things I find fascinating is how kind of the media perspective of Kent State has changed over time. Can you tell me, like, how did the media at the time react to Kent State, and just how did people react, and how has that changed, you know, some years later now?
Well, the media at Kent State, they never let a good riot go to waste. Okay, and as this one, I think the Kent State thing changed the atmosphere in the media totally. I really do. I think it had a maybe not so good effect, because previous to that they reported the news, and now large media organizations have became agents of political parties, and that's been taking them 50 years to get there. But I put it right back to the 70s, not particularly Kent State, but to the 70s, and I'm not sure that's real good. Before, you had people that went on the TV at night, and they pretty much read the news, and they didn't attack people too much, you know, except if somebody was taken away in handcuffs, that kind of thing. So, I don't know.
And I guess the second half of that question is, what did the people, not the like university people, but like the townspeople of Kent and just around Ohio that you spoke to, what did they think?
At the time or since?
At the time.
Well, actually, they were very supportive. That riot scared the townspeople really bad. And they're still that way. Whenever the local newspaper every once in a while will run some editorial, when there's some kind of a liberal demonstration of some kind or other editorial, and they'll remind everybody about how hostile and scary that 1970 was. Okay, so yeah, it affected it a lot in that regard. Now I didn't bring them, but I have several letters from church organizations addressed to Captain Snyder, first of the 145, and they were very supportive letters, and one time received money in the mail from a church, you know, to help defray any additional expenses and for the troops, which they didn't really need.
Have you kept in contact with any of your fellow National Guardsmen over the years since
Oh, yeah.
then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think they would be interested in doing a project like this?
Well, I think David has already talked with some of them, or at least one of them, the bank president, and yeah, most everybody went on, they lived their lives. I have about a dozen that I stay in contact. They're on my Facebook, actually. And there's a website on Facebook. It's called You Know You're From Akron or something like that. And somebody brought up an old picture of the Akron riots. And next thing I know, one of my old troopers, who was a machine gunner, he set him straight right away that that's not how this happened, you know. And next thing I know, you know, he sends me an instant message. Well, I hadn't seen him until then, but they show up all the time.
Have you returned to campus since that day?
Oh, I'm there all the time. I work there.
Would you like to talk more about that?
I don't know. I return to campus and I'm there, you know.
Oh, what do you do on campus?
Okay, I'm a security officer.
Okay.
Part-time.
Now, you have spoken a lot about these events, like publicly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell me, why do you, like, I guess, why do you do that? Why do you do things like this? Is there a thing that motivates you, or?
No, not really. I mean, nobody else is talking from the Guard to speak of, you know.
Right.
And that's a significant part of this. You know, I mean, after all, a lot of people are interested, if you will. And I'm just a guy who, like I've told you at the start of this thing, you know, my life's an open book. You want to know something? I'll tell you.
Right.
I've been involved in a lot of things during my life. You know, several lethal force incidences, and I've arrested a lot of people. You know, it's just one of those things. And I did enough high-profile investigations to know that somebody needs to speak up and set the facts straight. So I speak the facts, as I know them. But, you know, the only disappointing thing is sometimes when I speak, like over at the university or somewhere, some of the old, what I call ones that are trying to get even, they'll take something that I said 50 years ago and they'll try to sharpshoot me with it, you know. Well, I don't remember what I said 50 years ago exactly, by word for word, so maybe I used a little different word, but the incidences are still the same.
And so based upon you saying that you want to, like, set the facts straight, how do you feel that the National Guard has been treated in the Kent State narrative?
Oh, terrible. Terrible.
How come?
Well, the reason why is, first off, they already knew what all the evidence was, but they still, some young civil rights prosecutor tried to prosecute some innocent guys. And then when it got to court, it was dismissed before the first witness was called. You know, that's a lot of aggravation for somebody to handle. And, you know, people like myself, we understand how that goes, you see. But you take the average trooper, for example, if you enlisted in the Guard, and you'd went to training and everything, and suddenly you're thrown into a situation, and the next thing you know, you're sued for $100 million or something. And then there's a year or two of taking a criminal charge that could cost you 20 years in the penitentiary. and then you get to court and it's dismissed. You worried for nothing. And nobody said, oh, we're sorry. We're sorry. You know, or here's $10,000 for your trouble. Nothing like that happened. You see what I mean?
Right.
Aside from that, the civil trials. It took a major thing to convince people in Columbus to start hiring lawyers to represent these guys, because it had never been heard of. You know, we've been out in riots before, people got hurt, people got injured, you know, and suddenly the lawsuits are going to be coming. They just ignored everything, see? Because after all, it was government. You were allowed to sue the government. You're aware of that, right?
Right.
Okay.
You previously mentioned the possible use of tear gas and some of these more contemporary events
Yes.
surrounding George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. Do you see any of those parallels from those events to Kent in 1970?
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing?
Nothing. I see no parallels.
Tell me about why.
Well, they didn't deploy any tear gas. They didn't deploy any riot control. They let them burn those parts of the city down. They actually allowed them to destroy public property, and except for I believe, the courthouse in Portland. They deployed Homeland Security or something, and they protected the courthouse, although they wanted to burn it down, but they prevented it. I don't know how you could draw a parallel. No tear, nothing. They didn't even arrest anybody. You see what I mean? I think there's a okay. Let me think about that and say this. I see this as a political riot,
Right.
as opposed to a demonstration or anything close to anything Kent State was.
Right.
Okay? Kent State, at that time, every male that walked, that was physically able, was going to be subjected to the draft. Okay? The draft meant they were going to be taken into the Army. They were going to be forced to train as a soldier. Some would qualify to be an infantryman, and some would probably go to Vietnam, and some would have probably been killed. And they, according to everything I seen, this was a demonstration, riot, if you will, over the draft and the U.S. involvement in war. But I think it was ill thought, because we have wars around this world. And unless we want them sitting in our back doorstep with rifles that want to drag everybody out that's hiding and execute them, we need to fight wars, you see. And although I'm not justifying Vietnam,
Right.
okay? I mean, I know about that war. I trained with people who, none died that I trained with at Fort Benning. But the last time I seen one of my best friends, I put him on a plane for Korea to guard a missile base over there with an infantry platoon. An Asian guy named Harry Yamamoto. Harry was a great guy. Next thing you know, they deploy him from Korea to be a platoon leader in Vietnam. In fact, last time I seen him was about 5 years ago when I was going from Montana to Seattle, and he was he owns about 1,000 acres of farmland there. His family, which is an interesting story, his family originally went there from World War II, and they came back and bought land and became rich.
Is there, do you have anything?
I don't have any.
Is there anything you want to talk about that we haven't asked you about?
Well, let's see. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for not asking me the detail about how, you know, what time was and this and that, you know, because that's a long time ago, and I didn't refresh myself with any documents.
We understand.
No, it's all right, yeah.
So, well, thank you for that. But I think that, you know, as you age, either you tell yourself that you're more wise, or sometimes people tell you that you're more wise than you were. So we always get more wise as we get older. And what I see now, you ask a very good question. There's a difference in riots. And the 1968, MLK riots in Washington, D.C., I was there at that time. And the 1968 riots in Akron, Ohio, and the Cleveland riots. Those were civil rights riots that got out of hand. And the Kent State riot, I've explained that to you.
Right.
But that's a riot that's a demonstration that got out of hand. And my personal observations is this. I don't think any of those people think, and the rioters I'm speaking of, that it was possible that they could die at that time. Okay. Whether it be George Floyd or what have you. And the thing that's happens is some kind of magic that I don't know exactly how, but I call it riot leadership, if you will. The Kent State riots had leaders. They had more than one. The Akron riots had leaders, more than one, each of them having their own little dynasty, if you will. And all these other riots has had leaders. But what happens is the leaders fail in their leadership. When they fail in their leadership, they jeopardize the lives of everybody there. Because without laws and without control, society will fade into nothing worthwhile. And so you're always going to have government or some organization wanting to control that and get everybody done with safe. If you can demonstrate and have a leader that is competent as a leader that says, okay, we made our point, let's go home, and have everybody do it. But instead, elements of the demonstration then break off, and the next thing you know, the thing is a full-blown riot and people get hurt. And government leadership fails occasionally. Now, you notice Ron Snyder's Charlie Company, one of the 145, they did everything I told them to do.
Right.
I could have stopped anything with them or started anything, you understand? But in Washington, D.C., now I'm not drawing a parallel there, but in Washington, D.C., with the recent demonstration, which they're calling terrorism and everything else, they don't know real terrorism. But that was going just fine when that group marched down to the Congress and everything. But you see that they had the wrong kind of leaders there. They followed the wrong people, the ones in the lead. And as a result of that, they've made everybody else look bad. I doubt if 5% of that crowd, I don't know how big the crowd is, I would doubt if 5% of that crowd had any idea that this was going to happen or that there was going to be people get hurt. And so there's all this fluff in politics. Politics is a big, big deal. And if you don't have leaders in politics that know what they're doing, you get chaos. That's my takeoff.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure to have you
so
here.
much.